wobbly lines, you know, like, you know, I try and keep them straight, and then one will just, you know, like I'll get a straight one and be like, oh yeah, and then it'll just sort of, whoops.
There's quite a lot of practice, precision in the hand.
It is, yeah. And it's nice when it does that.
That's the balance for me there, is that it's the hand, but it's not, there's still there's a dynamic precision to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's somehow controlled. It's freehand, but there's control.
Let me be a manta ray. You're allowed to dance with these paintings, you know. Sweep around. You're allowed to dance in front of the paintings. It's in the instructions. Here's my instructions. These are my instructions. And my instructions are pretty much everything. How to play the game, you know. And so you can play it that way, but it's written up the other way as well, so you can also play it that way. And maybe you can play it that way. Or maybe you can play it that way. But obviously you've got to dance with those instructions. Hello, I'm taking these down to put in the boxes just over here to send to Townsville. When I would show them here to people during the exhibition and then try to explain why I'm making work about the barrier reef here, I'd say that I've constructed a tunnel through the center of the earth, and I'm looking down through the tunnel, and so you can see the reef, you can see the colors and everything like that. But it's a pretty long way away down through the tunnel, and so it reflects and refracts in different ways. And it's a nice explanation, and I think that tunnel is made of the poems. So fish first, right? 287. 287. This is a golden lined whiting. So the texts are in here somewhere. Should I read the whole thing? No. And then here's a poem. Let me read the poem. Very discernible to the touch, so very dissimilar. Golden lines taken in company. With deception it grows, is rarely seen. It prefers to search alone, to distinguish a length of death. 7, sometimes 8. Shallow black saddles, target and amass, points in a puddle and collapse. Most are snatched, weighing 5 to the pound over a century ago. A belief surfaces that the king has been taken. So you see they become these very abstract, surreal poems, you know, they're beautiful things. And so I'm still wrapping my head around the whole thing, but like, simple this phrase here, 7, sometimes 8, shallow black saddles, target and amass, points in a puddle and collapse. This points in a puddle, you know, that's enough for me, that's huge. It's like an image of infinity, you know, we're all just points in the puddle, patterns in the dust. So Nathan gave me this big body of poems that I've been working from for now since 2017, so it's now like 4 years. I thought it'd be 6 months, but you know, just kind of, there's 77 of these poems, and they're cut-ups from Grant's Guide to Fishes.
Yes.
And so it's very much about the coast and the reef, and both of like Nathan's experience of the water and my experience. And so there's different works, like the text work and stuff, but these paintings are like just trying to catch the atmosphere of different times of day, the light on the water or under the water or in the sky. And so, you know, dawn and dusk, and like just from fishing and, you know,
and the quality of light around these times. And
and like if the painting can be kind of just like a box atmosphere, sunset painting really isn't, like when, you know, when it's like when the cane fields are on fire, you know, I don't want to sound like romanticizing my childhood, but we get like crazy sunsets up around Innisfail and like over the water and just the whole sky on fire, I guess. It's pretty nice working. I've never painted such a red painting before.
It's very intense.
There's a line in the poems, present when the present is gutted. So I'm thinking about calling this like gutted present. You know, when the sunset looks just like a gutted fish. That colour underneath, the first colour, which is the greenish light blue, that's the lightest parts of the painting, was just so full on at the beginning that I was just trying to tone it down. So the light in it comes from that colour, I think.
And going from so many years of black and white work, almost solely, to something like this, that's really like...
I don't know.
It's an explosion of colour, you know.
It's sort of been 4 years of trying to find my way with colour. And I'm finally, maybe getting there. Like I certainly, now it's been nice painting these intense coloured paintings, where before it was always washing the colour out, keeping it very subtle, which I like too, but like, especially over this winter, it's been so bleak and grey in this Berlin lockdown. Hello Australia, this is... It's like the image emerges out of the process. I'm not constructing an image because I'm just doing, you know, either a layer of lines or a layer of colour over it and then like scrubbing it back or doing it again. The image comes at some point out of those structures. And so and the broken lines, or like where there's lines missing or whatever, it just keeps it moving.
What's interesting for me is that we go through this process of the book, the content, it goes through Nathan. There's a memory of the book, but it's not the book. It's totally its own thing, but there's a memory of those.
Of course, it's like the chalk drawings, right? You know, like where you rub out the drawing, you do the next drawing. But I might have done 1,000 drawings on a board, and the first drawing's still there. Even if all of the dust is now wiped away, it's influenced the drawing after, which has influenced the drawing after, which has influenced the drawing after.
So the other ones we looked at, they have the nets, they have the grid. What informs the choice to leave this open, or like, what's the difference? Like,
I was umming and ahhing it for a few days, but it's just too intense. I was thinking if I put lines over it, it'll do something beautiful. It'll dazzle between those lines. But I think I'll lose that glow that it's got. And so I'll just let the lines be in the other paintings and leave this one. And it means if some are nice when they're completely faded away or barely even there, but because of the regularity, it doesn't matter when they kind of can go right off shape and things like that, and your eyes still... And I think that makes part of what makes a dazzle is that kind of irregular...
Shimmer or dazzle, that's also interesting, isn't it?
Shimmer, I've been thinking about shimmer a lot, you know, this is this indigenous concept of from Turkey Creek area. I can't, Biyan is the word, and it's like the sense of rhythm in the world that's going on, the light and landscape, but also the relationship of animals and plants, that where everything's just shimmering, and you sort of dance it into being, or I would go fishing at dawn off Sapphire Beach when I was staying with my sister, you know, in the months after my mum passed away. And so I'd go down there in the dark and then fish the dawn, and sometimes get, like, you know, 2 bream for breakfast. Yeah. And in this beautiful spot, and there's no one else on the beach. And but it would get so bright when the sun comes over the horizon. You know, like you can't see a thing except because of the colour, how bright it is. Yumi and Hinak in the studio, playing with my blocks. And you know, we started this during the same time that I was just starting to paint the word paintings. This free play, which allows for, I think that was really good. We were all in a difficult spot with our work, with our things going on in our lives, and that the free play allowed for that opening of process. You know, the paintings are two-dimensional, they're flat, they're pattern, right? And they're triangles and squares and things like this. This project has been a big influence on the paintings, you know? Yeah. And it's points in a puddle, you know? That's enough for me, that's huge. The points in the puddle is an image of infinity from Nathan's poems, I think. You know, he always has these strange images of infinity. The work looks sort of like a star map, or like a star map of the inner swamp. You know, that was my, but I can't call it a star map, it's too. Yeah. But points in a puddle is nice, it keeps it underhanded. I struggled with it a lot. It was a lot of layers, and I ended up scrubbing it back with a scourer, and you know, like it was completely lost at times, and then it would emerge again, and still every layer is still visible in it. And then the final layer, I came in and just put these white points across the thing, and it set the whole thing alive. It just like. And I've been working with lines and planes of colour, but I haven't been working with points yet as well. And also the kind of physics going on in the painting, in that little micro-universe of the painting, I think has a strong relationship to Nathan's physics in the poems, you know, and where there's only one, where surfaces are kind of absolute, that divides above and below, which is the surface of the water that's present in Grant's books. And so in the painting that's twisted upwards, where you have the surface of the painting and the apparent depth, you know, and there's depth that happens in layers, but the depth that happens by the perspective of the geometry. And there's a thing about the painting, something to do with the scale of the dots that are more, it's more like the micro or the macro. It's either very small or very big, where the others are more human scale, like the image, if it's an image, it looks like, like either stars or points on
it goes from micro to macro. I know we've talked a lot about where those two meet Yeah, it comes together in like a funnel and meets.
Yeah.
And they're both present somehow.
It's nice though, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
really, so it feels like a magic painting. Anchored. Anchored behind the tide. Anchored deep. Anchored deep behind the tide. Mobbed by clouds. Lost in midair. Backwards. Beneath. The tiny second. The great second. Near enough. It's packing day. Well, it's been packing day for a few days. I'm a bit stuck. So this is a slackwater mammoth. It's all there. And I think Dawn is a nice one to put on the top. And so it fits in this box nice and easy. I hope I get to see it again. And these are my colour studies, what I've called the slackwater colour studies, and this really where I started very experimenting with colour and pattern in such a way, this kind of loose, free-form way. I buy my pigments and mix it with egg tempera and learn how to make my paints, and so there's a lot of experimentation with the raw pigments and the kinds of medium, learning them, I suppose. At the same time, reading Nathan's poems. I'd often spend the evenings here, maybe very intensely for about a year. And then when I started taking these sort of experiments into big paintings, I would save my leftover paint, and it would often be my final thing on an evening, in the evening in the studio. Or I'd sit and read and do things like that, like study time. I like to draw and paint a lot when I'm thinking and stuff. And sometimes I end up with these notes on them. I'm not sure to send the ones with the notes because I don't think I've typed them up or anything, and some of them are nice. Shimmer. Shimmer is a beautiful word, and it's an Aboriginal philosophical word that I first read about from an Australian anthropologist, an American anthropologist, Deborah Bird Rose, who was at the ANU for many years and passed away a couple of years ago. And I see this concept in somehow in opposition to the sublime and beautiful that I was directed to at university, And the sublime is something that exceeds its framework. So it's like the difference between something that's known and good, and something that somehow pushes out beyond that. So the towering mountain, the stormy sea, and of course, God. Being is a shimmer, the brilliance. It's a kind of motion. It grabs you, allows you, or brings you into the experience of being part of a vibrating and vibrant world. It's a capture that is all over the place. Water capturing and reflecting the sun glinting on water, the eyes of the beholder captured and enraptured, an ephemeral dance of it all. In music, there are multiple different temporal patterns, and it is through those temporal patterns that one starts to experience shimmer. Ethnomusicologists describe this experience as iridescence. The temporal patterns are a kind of foregrounding and backgrounding, flipping back and forth to the point where music and dance become iridescent with ancestral power. For myself, I disagreed, saying that I was a fish I had yet to meet. At a given signal, they crowd together in dense companies and move across the damp world. Nathan Shepherdson, Slackwater.
I would read the poems. I'd read the poems as I was here doing this, trying to find out how I could figure out how to respond to them in a way, looking for a structure, a format, a way to bounce the poems into colour. I'm just going to say it, I think the poems have their own physics. And I've been trying to find a way to represent that physics within the structure of these abstract paintings. And it works because it's free form, and it works because it's born out of a cut up process of fragmentation. And that fragmentation allows for this ambiguity and therefore this greater association of meaning.
It'd be nice if, you know, you could fall into the painting. And that sense that it envelops you. And I think that's why it needs to be this size, and why I've struggled with making smaller ones, is that when you come up to it, you can...
Yeah, it becomes partially a field, or its relation to the body. It is big enough for you to go and fall into it.
Yeah.
And it has the depth.
I did fall into it. Well, you fell into me. I was turning it the other day while I was painting, because I keep turning them. And I do it in here alone just by grabbing it, right, and then spinning it. And then the whole painting fell. It fell and hit my forehead. And so I'm leaning here with
You were inside it.
with it up. And I went to clean off and I just had a big yellow patch. Should I say, this is Grant's Guide to Fishes. That's from Arryn Grant himself. There he is, he's about 90 now, 94 maybe? Born 1924, what's that? And it's beautiful, huh? Look at this book. Is it good? Mm-hmm. Every one of these photographs he took. Maybe some his son. I like, often he uses the rope. It's this ground, he has this rope. And he wrote about them all, and the writing is fantastic too. And then Nathan wrote the poems by taking a fish. Let's choose a poem. Let's just go to the first, Slack Water. This is on slack water at the dark of the moon, further confused by the presence of a brother, unrelated to something approaching mystique and nothing else, heavy-shouldered above a row of glistening spots along the lateral line. These fade upon death. The mouth is bright orange, feeding on him, feeding on the surface, out of him, to the surface. But that's from page 436. It's a jewfish. We call them, it's a mulloway. And this is the beach that I grew up on. It's called Mulloway Beach. This is like a pretty magical fish that the fishermen always talk about in hushed terms. It's nice. And so all the words of that poem are somewhere within here. But we look at it, we have gravity in our eyes. You know, you turn it upside down, it has a different weight, a different feeling. And so that idea of shimmer, you know, like when I did my thesis, the way I was taught at art school, you know, it's like from Kant, you know, beauty is something that fits well within its framework. The sublime is something that exceeds the framework, right? Or gives you the idea of exceeding. And so, you know, the sublime is God, the sublime is nature. But this is a hierarchical structure. If you really follow like this idea of shimmer or beyond, as Deborah Rose talks about it, shimmer is only reciprocal. between people and animals, between animals and plants and people and objects. You know, everything is a double relationship, you know, and it's all just interaction within the universe. It's all just interaction of different patterns. And so it's very nice to paint patterns and watch them interact. And then there's a bigger pattern in this, the triangles and the colors. And then there's the awkwardness of my hand, you know, and if I'm on a clear day, the lines look very different to if I'm in a murky day, you know, or if I'm too self-conscious or if I'm in the zone or whatever. And so it collects my awkwardness, it collects my vulnerability. Seeing so much music, you know, hanging out with our mates, Sam, Pedro, and like Pascal and Max, and, you know, going to see heaps of music all the time, you know, like most Adam and Yuka, how many drummers do we know? Alex, like, you know, like, talk about rhythm. And Berlin is just so full of music, and there's such a, I don't know, we're just doing it in basements and bars and studios.
And the grid also, there's a relation to rhythm as well, yeah, in terms of this.
Very much so, I think. Like, it's not, because like, you know, the diagonals push and pull your eye around the surface and create these relationships, and then you get sort of repetitions of form that also create movement and all of that. Like, you could play them, Pedro and I, Pedro's, you know, is a drummer, and we're talking about how you could play them as a musical score, you know, just by which, you know, which angle is what, and like just play them up and down. So I'm thinking about putting points on it as well. So
let's have a look. Yeah,
testing with
let's try it.
We're going. Just put some on where the lines cross.
It's interesting what a difference this makes. Yeah.
It just it's amazing, huh? It just pulls that part of the structure forward and creates a bigger depth within the picture. So.
Because they come so far forward.
Yeah.
And because of the contrast between the dark of the blue and then...
But I think I leave the centers. I think I leave them as like black holes. So then it's sort of like... Because then the diamonds start to spin around the...
It adds other points of gravity, yeah? Like, or pivot points. Because often when I'm looking at these that have the diamond forms, it's like they're spinning, yeah, or like the facets of the diamond come forward for me, sometimes forward and then others go back.
So it's nice. I was struggling to get small paintings from these because when they're the paintings, I want them to be a kind of field that you can fall into.
Yeah.
And with smaller paintings, you need objects in them more or something. So the small paintings weren't working so much. But now with the watercolors, you sort of let them have objects and shapes.
But they started off kind of as color studies, yeah, like for learning the relationship between color but sort of always maintaining the grid.
Well, it started because of winter, right?
Yeah.
And just being in lockdown and then like super low energy because it's grey and dark and you're doing nothing. And so I just started doing these watercolours and doing them as colour studies.
Yeah.
And just making grids and then like circles and little shapes, and I just wanted more and more colour. And like,
yeah, they're beautiful little crystals of colour. Yeah.
I kept doing these sunset ones just because there's no sun. It's a nice one. So it's like they're getting silly names. This one's called Submarine Taco. This one's All Your Eggs in One Basket. That was the first that I liked. This one's Smoky Balls in the Sky. So you can still sort of feel slack water through the wall as well. So it's like a mixture of Nathan's poems, the ocean, like early modernism and Goethe and like Berlin brutalism.
Yeah, there's a lot of sunrises, sunsets, horizon lines, water.
Yeah. It's nice, and the sunset ones, that one's so intense. Oh, wow.
Oh, I love that.
Warmth.
It's radiating warmth.
Yeah.